It's one thing to walk away from a man, but it's another to walk away from the entire life you built with him. Melody Shari didn't just leave a marriage. She left a whole city behind. After years of betrayal, courtroom battles, and emotional exhaustion, she finally decided peace was worth more than pride. Huntsville had become a battlefield. Every street a reminder of heartbreak, every familiar face another rumor waiting to spread. So she packed her bags, gathered her children, and drove toward a new beginning in Atlanta. People called it running away, but Melody knew better. She wasn't running. She was rising. Because sometimes survival looks like silence, and healing looks like distance. Behind the smiles and the cameras, her world had shattered, but instead of breaking, she rebuilt. The move wasn't about escaping Martell Holt. It was about protecting her children, her sanity, and her future. Atlanta wasn't just a city. It was a rebirth. A place where she could rewrite her story on her own terms, without fear, without judgment, and without chains. For Melody Shari, this wasn't the end of love and marriage. It was the beginning of freedom. It started with exhaustion, the kind that seeps into your bones and steals your sleep at night. Melody Shari had been fighting for so long that she couldn't even remember what peace felt like anymore. Every court date, every argument, every accusation had chipped away at her spirit until all that was left was survival. The house in Huntsville that once felt like home had turned into a museum of memories she no longer wanted to visit. The laughter that used to fill the rooms had been replaced by tension, the kind you could almost touch. She'd look around at the walls and see more than just paint. She saw betrayal, lies, and broken promises. Even her kids could feel it, the shift in the air, the heaviness that hung between their parents. They didn't have the words for it, but they understood enough to know that their mother was carrying a burden too heavy for one person to hold. The decision to move to Atlanta wasn't impulsive. It was born out of desperation and courage wrapped into one. Melody knew that staying in Huntsville meant staying in the cycle. Constant reminders of Martell, constant judgment from people who loved gossip more than truth. She wanted her children to wake up in a place where their parents' past didn't define them. So she started packing. One box at a time, she closed the door on her old life. Every item she touched carried a memory, some sweet, some painful. Her daughter held onto her favorite doll, refusing to let go, while her son watched in silence, trying to make sense of it all. Melody tried to keep her composure, but every time she taped a box shut, it felt like sealing away another piece of her heart. She knew what people would say. They'd whisper that she was running away, that she was selfish, that she was breaking the family apart. But Melody had learned the hard way that sometimes strength looks like walking away from the things that are killing you slowly. The courtroom moment was the final straw. Martell had walked in with his usual arrogance, believing he could control the outcome like he always did. He was used to getting his way, used to manipulating situations until he looked like the victim. But this time was different. This time the judge saw through the performance. When the ruling came down, granting Melody permission to move the children to Atlanta, the silence in the room was louder than any argument that had ever passed between them. Martell's face fell, the realization hitting him like a punch to the chest. Melody didn't gloat. She didn't celebrate. She simply sat there, her hands trembling slightly under the table, knowing that her life was about to change forever. It wasn't victory she felt, it was relief. After the court hearing, she walked outside with her sunglasses on, avoiding eye contact with the reporters hovering nearby. To them, it was just another headline, another messy celebrity breakup. But to Melody, it was survival. She wasn't running away from Martell. She was running toward peace. That night, she sat in her car, engine off, staring at the stars and trying to process it all. The tears came silently, not from regret, but from the release of years of holding everything in. She whispered a small prayer under her breath, not for revenge, not for justice, but for peace. Because peace was the one thing money, fame, and control couldn't buy. And that's what she was determined to find, even if it meant starting over completely alone. The morning of the move came quietly, without fanfare or goodbyes. Melody woke before the sun, her mind racing, her heart steady. She moved through the house slowly, taking one last look at everything that once felt like forever. The walls echoed with memories she didn't ask for, reminders of laughter that turned into arguments, of love that turned into survival. Outside, the moving truck waited, its engine humming softly like it knew what this moment meant. The kids were half asleep, clutching pillows and toys, unaware of how much their world was about to change. Melody loaded the final box herself, shut the door, and stood there for a moment, breathing in the cool Huntsville air one last time. It was bittersweet, freedom mixed with fear. The drive to Atlanta felt endless, every mile pulling her further from her past and closer to the unknown. The kids slept most of the way, but Melody's thoughts didn't rest. She kept replaying Martell's words, his anger, his disbelief. She wondered if he'd ever understand that this wasn't about punishing him. It was about protecting what was left of her family. When the Atlanta skyline finally appeared, glimmering under the setting sun, she whispered a quiet thank you to the universe. The new house smelled like paint and emptiness, but to Melody, it smelled like peace. She put the kids to bed and sat at the kitchen table surrounded by boxes, opening her laptop to face the reality of rebuilding from scratch, schools to enroll in, businesses to manage, bills to pay. Exhaustion tugged at her eyes, but hope kept her awake. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't waiting for an argument or a breakdown. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was healing. She looked around at her new beginning and promised herself that no matter what came next, she would never go back to living in pain disguised as love. The peace didn't last long before the past found its way back to her doorstep. It started with late-night phone calls, Martell's voice sharp and bitter, demanding answers, throwing accusations, trying to pull her back into the chaos she had fought so hard to escape. Melody stayed calm, her tone steady, refusing to give him the reaction he wanted. She had learned that silence could be more powerful than shouting. But Martell didn't stop there. Soon the blogs lit up with headlines, his social media posts painting him as the heartbroken father fighting to see his children. Some believed him, others saw through the act, but Melody didn't care about public opinion anymore. She cared about peace. Then one morning, as she dropped the kids at school, Martell showed up out of nowhere. The confrontation was tense, his frustration boiling over as phones recorded from a distance. Melody stood tall, her voice low and calm as she told him this wasn't about him anymore. It was about their children. That moment went viral, turning her into a symbol of quiet strength. Later that night, she sat alone, journaling by candlelight, writing promises to herself and her kids that the cycle of pain would end with her. Every tear that fell was a reminder of how far she'd come. Atlanta wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning of her freedom. Martell might have tried to shake her peace, but Melody had already built something stronger than control or fear. She found comfort in the quiet, purpose in her pain, and strength in the stillness. Each day she rose earlier, worked harder, smiled more genuinely. She wasn't running anymore, she was rising, standing as proof that healing doesn't mean forgetting, it means transforming. And as the city lights of Atlanta flickered through her window, she knew she hadn't just escaped her past. She had outgrown it. In the end, Melody Shari's story isn't about escape, it's about evolution. She didn't just leave a man, she left behind the version of herself that once settled for pain. She built a life where peace wasn't just a dream, but a daily decision. Martell might still be chasing control, but Melody had already won something far greater: freedom, purpose, and self-respect. She turned heartbreak into healing, silence into power, and loneliness into strength. Her journey from Huntsville to Atlanta wasn't just a move across cities, it was a move toward herself. And as she watched her children laugh freely in their new home, she finally understood that sometimes the loudest victory comes not from fighting back, but from letting go. If you felt Melody's journey hit close to home, make sure you hit that like button and drop a comment below. Tell us what you think. Was she right to leave it all behind for peace, or should she have stayed and fought it out? And don't forget to subscribe to The Hype Spill for more real stories, raw truths, and the drama behind the spotlight. Because over here, we don't just spill the tea, we spill the truth. Here, we don't just spill the tea, we spill the truth.